Welcome back to another deep dive, and hello to you, the learner. We are jumping straight into a really mind-bending philosophical riddle today.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those concepts that kind of makes your brain short circuit at first glance.
Right. So, the learner, I want you to think about this. If you do something genuinely good, like a truly noble act, but you could not have possibly done otherwise.
Like you were completely forced.
Exactly. Like your very nature, your neurological wiring, or your deepest ingrained habits absolutely forced you to do it. Do you still deserve praise for it?
It's a tough question, right?
It really, well, let's flip that around. What if you do something terrible, but your biases are so strong, your disposition is just so deeply carved into your psyche that you literally could not stop yourself?
Right, like you're on autopilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you still to blame? Are you morally culpable if you couldn't help it?
It feels incredibly counterintuitive. I mean, our immediate modern reflex is to just say no.
We want to let them off the hook.
Exactly. If a person lacked the absolute power to choose differently in the moment, if the deck was entirely stacked by their own internal psychology, then we instinctively want to withhold both the gold star and the guilty verdict.
Yeah, we assume moral responsibility requires this totally clean fork in the road.
A completely blank slate at the very moment of decision.
Right, exactly. But the text we are looking at today argues that our intuition is not just slightly off, but mathematically and philosophically completely backward.
It really pulls no punches.
No, it doesn't. We are diving into an 18th century masterwork, Jonathan Edwards' Freedom of the Will. And specifically, our mission today is to unpack part 3 of this massive text.
And part 3 is really where the heavy lifting happens.
It is. The goal is to help you understand how Edwards completely dismantles his opponent's views on free will, praise, blame, and this concept of necessity.
But before we get into the heavy philosophical machinery here, I think we need to set some ground rules.
Good idea. Establish the boundaries.
Right. So Edwards was a towering figure in 18th century theology, operating from a strictly Calvinist framework.
Very strict.
Yeah. And throughout this text, he is aggressively debating thinkers from the opposing camp, primarily Arminian theologians.
And they believed in a very different type of freedom, right?
Yes. They believed in a form of libertarian free will, which is basically the idea that you always possess the neutral power to choose otherwise.
Okay, so just to be super clear for the learner, we are not taking a theological or political side here today?
Absolutely not. Our purpose is not to declare a theological winner or validate either camp. We are strictly tour guides today.
Right, we're just impartially mapping out Edwards' logical arguments exactly as he presents them in the text.
Exactly. We want to let you, the learner, evaluate the mechanics of the philosophy for yourself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by looking at the central claim Edwards' opponents are making.
The Arminian claim.
Right. They argue that for anyone to be a true moral agent, there must be a complete lack of what they call necessity.
And necessity in this context means your choice is the inevitable result of prior causes.
Like your personality or, your upbringing or your desires.
Right. They say if your choice is necessary, it isn't truly free. You have to have the completely unfettered ability to choose good or evil.
Completely untethered from anything forcing your hand.
And that untethered state is really the crux of their entire argument.
So how does Edwards respond to that? Because it sounds kind of reasonable on the surface.
Well, he decides to test this theory by starting at the absolute highest peak of the moral ladder.
Oh, he goes straight to the top.
He does. He asks, if we adopt the rule that necessity destroys all praise, how does that rule apply to the ultimate standard of goodness?
He looks at God.
Yes, he looks at God. Because if being necessitated to do good means your goodness is just an empty reflex, well, we run into a massive theological problem.
A huge contradiction.
Exactly. Edwards pulls directly from the writings of an opposing thinker, a guy named Dr. Whitby.
Okay, what does Dr. Whitby say?
Whitby argues that if all human actions are necessary, then virtue and vice must be empty names.
Because you can't be praised for doing what you couldn't avoid doing.
That's his logic, yeah. Praise requires the risk of failure, according to Whitby.
Wait, let me push back on that logic before we even get to Edwards.
Sure, go ahead.
Think about a lifeguard. If I am drowning and a lifeguard saves me, I do not care if that lifeguard weighed the pros and cons in a state of perfectly neutral freedom.
Right, you're just glad they saved you.
Exactly. If their training and their compassion made it a psychological necessity that they dive in, I'm still praising them.
That's a really great analogy.
Because Whitby seems to imply that the value of an action isn't in the outcome or the intent, but strictly in the instability of the person who did it.
Instability is the perfect word for it.
Mm.
Whitby is essentially arguing that moral value lives in the volatility of the agent.
And God is definitely not volatile.
No. In Orthodox theology, God is infinitely, immutably, and necessarily holy.
His will is completely determined to do what is perfectly right.
Right. It is a metaphysical impossibility for God to choose evil.
Oh, wow. I see the trap Edwards is setting.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Because if Dr. Whitby is right, if you cannot be praised for doing what you cannot avoid doing,
Then the creator of the universe deserves absolutely no praise.
zero honor, zero glory for being good.
Because God is necessarily good. He can't help it. His own perfect nature forces his hand.
And Edwards points out the absolute absurdity of this conclusion. He writes that under Whitby's framework, God has no right to demand any grateful respect from his creatures.
Because he didn't take any risk in being good.
Exactly. His goodness is a fixed state, so according to the Arminians, it is completely devoid of moral worth.
Wait, so the opposing view essentially argues that a human who struggles to choose between good and evil is actually more praiseworthy than God.
That is the logical conclusion, yes.
Just because the human could have chosen evil. That is wild.
It is wild. It makes a deeply flawed human vastly superior in moral worth to a perfect God.
I highly doubt that's the conclusion these opposing theologians wanted to reach.
They definitely didn't. But Edwards is relentless. He forces them to own the logical endpoints of their own premises.
So he's saying that moral excellency doesn't come from the fact that you could have been evil but narrowly avoided it?
Right. He argues true moral excellency is having a nature so profoundly, fundamentally oriented toward the good that evil isn't even on the table.
The necessity of God's goodness is the very thing that makes him worthy of praise.
Precisely. Not the thing that disqualifies him from it.
Okay, so that handles God the Father, but doesn't Edwards bring this down to earth a bit?
He does. He extends this argument into the historical realm by bringing in the human nature of Jesus Christ.
Which is such a smart move to ground this in lived experience.
It's arguably his strongest textual evidence against his opponents. He notes that Christ's human soul was perfectly holy.
His will was infallibly determined to do the will of the Father.
Yes. He possessed an absolute inability to sin.
But he still lived a human life filled with severe moral tests.
Exactly. The text points out he was given commands, he faced real temptations.
Like the temptation in the wilderness. He experienced physical exhaustion, betrayal.
Right. And if we apply the opponent's logic to those events, the entire Christian narrative shatters.
Because if Christ possessed a holy necessity that made sin impossible, giving him commands was just a charade.
It would be meaningless.
Yeah.
And rewarding him for his obedience, which the texts clearly say he was rewarded for, would be nonsensical.
It would be like rewarding a rock for obeying the law of gravity.
That's exactly it. But the text portrays his obedience in the face of suffering as the ultimate act of virtue.
So Edwards is illustrating that Christ's necessary goodness didn't insulate him from moral action.
It amplified it. His absolute inability to sin didn't mean he was a robot.
It meant his internal disposition was just so fiercely aligned with the good that the temptations couldn't sway him.
Right. So Edwards concludes that being necessarily good is entirely consistent with being a moral agent worthy of reward.
It completely shifts the conversation away from what could you have done instead?
And forces us to ask, what is the actual nature of the choice you just made, and what does it reveal about your deepest inclinations?
Okay, so having looked at perfect goodness, I'm wondering how this applies to human failure.
This is where the tension really ratchets up.
Because if being forced to be good doesn't ruin praise, does being forced by your own bad habits to be evil ruin blame?
This brings us to what we might call the difficulty excuse.
The difficulty excuse. I like that.
Yeah, Edwards' opponents argued that an action is only culpable, meaning blameworthy, if the person had the true freedom to avoid it.
So if a temptation or a habit makes avoiding the sin incredibly difficult, it partially excuses the act.
That's their stance. And if your inclination toward evil is so absolute that it's impossible to overcome, you are wholly excused.
Okay, so the stronger the psychological bias toward a bad action, the less blame you deserve.
That's the math they were using.
Let's really test that, because we actually see this intuition a lot in modern legal defenses, right?
We do, yeah. We recognize that extreme psychological duress, limits freedom, so we reduce culpability.
Like the insanity plea or crimes of passion. So aren't Edwards' opponents just anticipating modern criminal psychology?
They are anticipating it, but Edwards argues they are fundamentally misunderstanding the relationship between the will and the action.
How so?
Well, he agrees that if someone is suffering from a literal delusion, like a brain tumor altering their faculties, they are excused.
Okay, so he's not totally without nuance.
Right. But the opponents are talking about something different. They're talking about a person whose cognitive faculties are fine, but whose moral desires are profoundly corrupt.
Meaning, if a person's greed is so powerful that they literally cannot resist stealing, their extreme greed is their excuse.
Exactly. Which leads to an absolutely staggering mathematical absurdity.
Let me guess. If limited freedom equals limited blame, then the more wicked you become, the less we can blame you.
You nailed it. If 10 degrees of bad habit remove 10 degrees of liberty, they must also remove 10 degrees of blame.
Here's where it gets really interesting for the learner. Let's put this in a real-world context.
Go for it.
Imagine a teenager who has generally good character, but makes a rash, uncharacteristic decision to steal a candy bar.
Okay.
According to this opposing logic, that teenager is highly blameworthy because they had a relatively free will.
Right, they had a clean fork in the road.
Exactly. But now compare that to a hardened, lifelong criminal who is absolutely a slave to their greed.
Someone whose empathy centers are practically atrophied.
Yes. Their habit of deceit is so strong they couldn't tell the truth to save their life. By the opponent's math, that lifelong predator is practically innocent.
Because their habit is so strong, they, quote-unquote, couldn't help it.
The worse you get, the more innocent you become. That flips common sense completely upside down.
It inverts the entire concept of justice. Edwards argues that a strong bent toward evil doesn't excuse you. It is the very definition of being a wicked person.
So when we say someone is bad, we aren't saying they have a perfectly neutral will that randomly chose evil today.
No, we are saying they possess a deeply rooted disposition that leans toward malice.
The habit itself is exactly what we are condemning.
Exactly. But, the opponents do have a philosophical objection to this.
Which is?
Well, if a person's disposition dictates their choices, and they didn't choose their childhood environment or genetic predispositions, how is it fair to punish them?
Ah, right. If humans are totally trapped by their bad inclinations, why is it fair for God or any authority to issue commands they can't follow?
And this is where Edwards introduces the most vital distinction in the entire text. It's the framework that holds his whole philosophy together.
Yeah, let's hear it.
It's the difference between natural inability and moral inability.
Let's take this slowly. Dissect natural inability first.
Natural inability occurs when a person completely lacks the physical capacity, mental faculty, or external opportunity to do a thing.
Regardless of how much they want to do it.
Right. Edwards uses examples like being commanded to understand the thoughts of angels, or lacking the physical strength to lift a massive boulder.
And he agrees this does excuse a person, right?
He completely agrees. If a man is paralyzed, you cannot condemn him for refusing to walk, no matter how righteous walking might be.
Because the person is willing, but physically unable.
Exactly. The will is not the point of failure. But then he contrasts this with moral inability.
And this is the game changer.
It really is.
Yeah.
Moral inability means the person has the physical capacity, they understand the situation, there are no external barriers.
So why can't they do it?
Because their will is entirely opposed to the command. They are unable because they absolutely do not want to.
So if I command you to swim across a lake and you can't because your arms are tied, that's natural inability. You're excused.
Spot on.
But if your arms are free and you refuse because you intensely hate the water, that's moral inability. You're physically able, but your will is the obstacle.
And Edwards argues this moral inability offers absolutely no excuse.
Because the will itself is the ultimate target of the command.
Yes. When a moral directive is issued, it isn't merely asking for robotic bodily compliance. It's demanding a specific state of the will.
It's demanding that you actually want to do the right thing.
Precisely. If the reason you fail is because your will is too greedy or hateful to comply, that defect of the will is the crime itself.
So it doesn't matter how your will became greedy, the fact remains that your will is greedy.
You are doing exactly what you want to do. You aren't fighting against your will, you are endorsing it.
Wow, he's saying you can't say, I am innocent of hating my neighbor because I hate my neighbor so much that I can't stop.
Right, possessing a bad will is the indictment. It cannot be the defense.
This forces some really uncomfortable self-reflection.
How so?
Well, think about how often we use the phrase, I can't, when we actually mean, I fundamentally do not want to.
Oh, all the time.
We disguise moral inability as natural inability to protect our egos. We say, I just can't forgive that person, framing it like a physical boulder we can't lift.
But Edwards strips that comfort away. He says you possess the cognitive faculty to forgive. You just love your resentment more than you love grace.
That is a profound unmasking of human rationalization.
It is. But the Arminians had another defense prepared, one that feels very modern.
Okay, what's their next move?
They argued that even if someone suffers from this moral inability, what if they genuinely try?
The everyone gets a participation trophy defense.
That's exactly. What if their disposition is broken, but they make a sincere endeavor to overcome it? Doesn't that count for something?
The sincerity loophole.
Right. The opponents argued for the sincerity of desires and endeavors. They said if someone does what they can, they should be excused.
It sounds compassionate on the surface.
It does. But Edwards slices right through this by asking a very simple question. What is the person actually desiring?
Okay, define what he means by that.
He introduces the distinction between direct and indirect willingness.
Tell me more about that.
Well, imagine a person with a deeply selfish will. They have no genuine love for goodness, but they believe if they don't perform virtuous acts, they'll suffer eternal torment.
Or just go to prison in a secular context.
Sure. So out of sheer terror, they force themselves to give to charity.
They perform the external mechanics of virtue?
Yes, they have a sincere endeavor. But Edwards asks, what are they sincere about? They don't love the charity. They have an indirect willingness.
They only want to do the action as a mechanism to achieve their true desire, avoiding pain.
Exactly. The text uses a fascinating medical analogy for this.
Oh, I remember this. It's like a sick person who desires a bitter medicine that they absolutely abhor.
Right, they gag at the smell and texture. Their direct inclination is entirely opposed to it.
But they possess a powerful desire to not die, so they force themselves to swallow it. They desire the medicine indirectly, just to save their life.
And Edwards asks, does the sick man deserve praise for loving the medicine?
Of course not. They don't love the medicine, they just fear death.
So in the moral realm, if you're trying to do good deeds purely out of terror of punishment, your will is not aligned with the good.
Your sincere endeavor to be good is actually just a sincere endeavor to be safe.
That completely invalidates the idea that trying your best is inherently virtuous. If your best is calculated self-preservation, it's morally bankrupt.
And the expert highlights a fantastic specific detail from the text here, right? The windmill.
Yes, the windmill.
Oh,
It's one of the most vivid metaphors in Part 3.
It's such a striking industrial image for an 18th century text.
He looks at a person performing external duties with great effort, but lacking a virtuous disposition. He says their actions have no more moral goodness than a windmill.
Because a windmill is just doing what it can, but it has no will.
Exactly. The wind blows, the gears grind. It might even grind wheat to feed a village. But there's zero moral goodness.
Because it's just responding to external pressure.
Right. Action without a truly good disposition has zero moral weight.
So what does this all mean? If our habits define our virtue, what exactly is the opposing view arguing for?
This takes us into their concept of the liberty of indifference.
Okay, define that for the learner.
This is their bedrock idea that to be truly free, the mind must be in a perfect state of equilibrium, a 50-50 balance, right before a choice is made.
So completely unswayed by any prior bias or habit.
Yes, a perfect vacuum of influence. If you have a natural temperament of extreme empathy, you aren't completely free when you help someone.
Because your empathy influenced the decision.
Right. You didn't choose from a state of pure indifference.
If we follow that logic, then a virtuous act must be performed coldly. The less you care, the more free and virtuous the act is.
That is the inescapable conclusion, and Edwards exposes it as contrary to common sense.
If I see my best friend in extreme distress and I help them out of a fierce, overpowering love that gives me no choice but to act.
Edwards' opponents would say that's not a virtuous act.
Because I wasn't indifferent about it. That's insane. The highest virtue would be helping them while feeling completely apathetic.
Edwards mocks this relentlessly. He says common sense dictates the exact opposite. The more your heart inclines toward the good, the more praiseworthy you are.
This completely invalidates the idea of good habits.
It does. By their logic, building a strong habit of honesty actually destroys your virtue because you are no longer indifferent to lying.
You'd have to scrub your psyche every morning to remain equally willing to be a saint or a serial killer just to stay free.
It turns character into a liability.
So if humans need to be totally 50-50 indifferent to be free, how do we ever convince anyone to do anything?
And that is Edwards' final logical takedown. It comes down to the concept of motives.
Arguments, persuasions, examples, threats, promises.
Right. Motives are designed to tip the scales.
If you preach a sermon to convince someone to be good, you are trying to destroy their equilibrium.
Exactly. Therefore, by giving someone a good reason to act, you are destroying their freedom and stripping their action of any potential virtue.
Think about this, learner. If this theory were true, giving your kids a good reason to share their toys would actually rob them of the ability to be truly virtuous.
Because you introduced a bias.
The best way to make people good would be to tell them absolutely nothing and let them choose at random.
Edwards proves the opposing view inherently contradicts the real-world use of logic, reasoning, and moral guidance.
A choice must be connected to the dictates of the understanding to be meaningful.
Right. Randomness is not freedom. It's just noise.
Well, we've covered a massive intellectual journey today. We've seen how Edwards defends the idea that true virtue and vice are tied to the nature of our choices, not their cause.
Necessity does not erase praise or blame.
So, to the learner listening, think about your own life. When you are praised for being a loyal friend, it's not because you flip a coin every morning.
It's because you have cultivated an inclination toward the good.
Your strongest habits are your truest self.
And that leaves us with a final lingering question from the text.
Let's hear it.
If true freedom isn't the ability to act completely at random, but rather the ability to act in perfect alignment with your deepest desires, then is it possible that we are never more free than when we are absolutely captivated by something we love to the point where we cannot choose otherwise?
Something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.